Good morning, everybody. It's Valerie Ling, clinical psychologist, coming to you live on, I think it's a little bit of a cold Monday morning. I think it is because I have been inside in my house all rugged up. And when I look outside, it does look a bit sunny. So I'm not sure whether it's colder in here, but it's warmer out there. Now, I'm talking today about compassion fatigue. And I'm just waiting to see if anybody is actually going to hop on and join me. A funny story happened at home for me this week. I got a package from Book Depository. Do you like getting things sent to you online? Well, I got 3 packages delivered to my home, and when I ripped them apart, lo and behold, there are another 3 books about burnout that I had purchased. And I like to keep up to date with what's happening, so I tend to read a lot in the area. And one of my family members asked me and looked at my books and asked me and said, "Are you really that interested in burnout? You seem to read a lot of things about burnout." I had to really think about it. Am I interested in burnout? I was like, well, I guess I am interested in burnout. And then they asked me, so is it something that you really enjoy? And I said, well, no, I don't enjoy burnout. It's like, then why do you read so much about it? And it really took me a while to think about that before I said, you know, I think it's not that I enjoy burnout, but I think it really bugs me that burnout exists and that people burn out, people that I care about, people that I know. And I'm just always really interested to try to find a way to think about it differently or to find practical ways that we can solve it. So there you go. Even at home, there's an observation that I tend to spend a lot of time thinking about burnout. All right, so I'm talking today about compassion fatigue. It's a fairly well-written, talked about concept if you go online and you just type that, it'll come up with all sort of stuff. In terms of research literature as a term, you know, there are a couple of definitions that get thrown about that does make research a little bit muddied at times. But what I'm realizing is that burnout has been talked about quite a lot now, so our research needs to catch up with it. So what I'm going to do today is to just talk about a couple of talk through a couple of slides that I actually presented when I was talking to a group of chaplains about burnout, and in particular because compassion fatigue seems to be something that comes up for the caring professionals quite a bit. So compassion fatigue. What is compassion fatigue? Compassion fatigue is basically a kind of an emotional and psychological fatigue that basically comes from caring for others day in, day out, particularly those of us who have a professional role caring for people. It's a kind of reaction to our work and to people where we get overwhelmed and overburdened by the caring that we need to do, not just for the individuals, but actually also at a holistic level, the fact that, you know, you get a little bit hopeless and a little bit sometimes even traumatized by the effects of suffering that you see in people. And it can actually start to impact our levels of functioning, the way that we sleep. We might actually feel levels of vicarious traumatization ourselves. We might actually feel like we want to isolate ourselves. We might start to blame ourselves. Our sleep might get impacted, our eating gets impacted, and we're actually really starting to feel like instead of being able to sit separate from the suffering that we're seeing, we're actually starting to mesh with it and become quite fatigued by it. So when I was talking to this group of chaplains, I was just pulling out some literature that was specific to them to try to help them to see that it is not really ideal to stay in that state of fatigue, particularly when you're trying to be resilient to burnout. So compassion fatigue is the emotional cost of caring. It is a stress response that can come without warning and includes feeling a sense of helplessness, isolation, and confusion. And in broad terms, compassion fatigue can also be understood as a kind of a secondary traumatic stress response. In other words, you're working with people who are having traumatic experiences and reactions, and you yourself start to get a secondary traumatic stress response. Now, that is not just compassion fatigue. That compassion fatigue also extends to work where there is no trauma involved, but you're helping people through a lot of personal pain and suffering. Okay, excuse me. So what we seem to know in terms of compassion fatigue is that it is positively correlated with the number of years that you have worked in the same employment position. In other words, if you've been working in a particular caring position for a number of years and the years are rolling on, there tends to be a correlation with compassion fatigue. In terms of a traumatic stress response, this tended to be associated with the number of hours that you actually spend per week caring for people who have had a traumatic experience. So the more number of hours you spend in traumatic and trauma-based work, the more likely you are, the more it is that you're at risk for actually having a vicarious or secondary trauma stress experience. Now, what has actually been shown to help that, however, is that social support, specifically if you have supervisory support and family support, buffered this reaction. Okay, so two kinds of support. In our world, with psychologists, supervisory support doesn't mean someone looking over your shoulder and supervising what you do. In fact, a supervisor is someone who holds your experience with you and helps you to process your reactions, your internal experiences, and helps you to pull out the you from your professional work from your client, right? And try to sort some of your reactions out. So compassion fatigue is actually really helped if you have such a person in place. Now, psychologists have that because we're mandated to do that. But if you're not in a profession, or if you're personally caring for someone and actually finding that you're starting to get fatigued, actually having someone else come into the picture with you, right? Some sort of a mentor or a counselor for yourself, or if you're a professional, another professional, a mentor to walk through with you. Some of that heavy load has been found to be a buffer for compassion fatigue. The other kind of support that has found to be very helpful is family support. We can't underestimate how our own personal vulnerabilities and our sense of being held and seen by the people who love us, and when we're supported as a human being, as ourselves, how that can actually help us to feel like, okay, my world, my life, I'm still okay, but the work that I'm doing is hard, right? I can't fix all of that, right? So making sure that your own personal connections are well, are strong and healthy, and putting some problem solving into that is also very important. There was another study that I looked at with the chaplains, and we were just looking to see, other than compassion fatigue, what promoted compassion satisfaction. That is, in your work, you're actually feeling like you are contributing meaningfully, though the suffering that you're seeing is very difficult. What enhances the satisfaction of actually being a professional helper in that role? Okay, so here's what contributes to compassion satisfaction. First of all, a positive perception of your working conditions. Now, if you work for yourself, I'm going to ask you this question. Are you a good boss? If you work for yourself, are you a good boss for yourself? Have you created a really positive work environment? It doesn't just mean a pretty office. It means, do you have support? Do you have a great team environment? Do you feel appreciated? Do you feel like there is support structures for you in place? What's your work atmosphere like? What's the culture of stepping into your work? Is it really conflictual? Is there low trust? Is there a sense that there's just in their own little island? Right? So your perception of your working conditions is a protective factor when it comes to compassion fatigue. And when you have higher levels of satisfaction in your work, in your role, not just the content of your work, but the environment and the support that you have, you're actually going to have a higher sense of achievement. You're not in it alone. The economics, the ergonomics, and the environment are all working for you to help you feel like you're doing your work in a really supported and meaningful way. Now, mindfulness has been shown to be a wonderful, fantastic method to actually cope with compassion fatigue. It is mindfulness for May at the moment. If you Google that, our website effectiveliving.com.au at the moment has got articles on mindfulness. The clinic Facebook page, Center for Effective Living Facebook page, has also got some articles and things that we've put out. So do have a look at that. Mindfulness has been shown to be quite an effective coping strategy with regards to compassion fatigue. What have I written here in my slides? It says, mindfulness may reduce the likelihood of feeling a sense of reduced personal accomplishment, since mindfulness attitudes are characterized by non-judgmental awareness. Further, mindfulness attitudes may ease emotional exhaustion by helping mental health counselors accept their current emotions and then letting go, right? Letting go. Maladaptive coping strategies, that was a significant predictor of burnout and compassion fatigue, was using denial, distraction, self-blame, and really holding on to those critical self-blaming emotions and thoughts as well. All right, so that's all I wanted to say about compassion fatigue. I'm fast becoming aware that though my work has really focused on professionals, I would like, I think at the end of these sorts, the couple of live streams that I'm doing now, to probably cast my mind to talk about just the mental fatigue and the workload of people in general. As we, are mums, dads, workers, workers is in the burnout work, but mums and dads in our relationships with one another, sisters, daughters, sons, how modern life is really just emptying our tank. So stay tuned for that. All right then, catch you later.